Welcome to the Attack the Rack YouTube channel. This is the Sammy Go Blue Show. This is your host, Sammy Go Blue. Today we have a special guest, former Western Michigan Broncos basketball coach and recently promoted associate coach for Southern Illinois University, Steve Hawkins. But before we get into the conversation with him, I gotta do the routine. I'm gonna pause now, so it gives you guys, the viewers and listeners, an opportunity to hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channels. It takes about a half second. It really benefits growing our YouTube channel. Also, with that said, any kind of local business that's looking for some advertisement, please reach out to us. We have some packages. It's a great way to advertise locally. But let's get into it. Coach, Steve Hawkins, welcome.
What's up, my guy? Doing okay?
Not much. Just trying to live the life. What's the weather like there in Carbondale, Illinois right now?
Well, we had a little bit of rain this morning. We've got a lot. We're right in the middle of transfer portal season, so we are smack in the middle of it right now. We had a little bit of rain this morning. Sun is out now. As a matter of fact, my wife and kids are on their way up to Kalamazoo. Right now for these week,
nice.
And I gotta stick around and figure out a way to pay the bills.
Oh, interesting way you put that. Way you put that. So Coach, like we talked previously, I had two instances where I came in contact with you, one directly, one indirectly. One, like I said, it was at a practice with Coach Rodriguez, who is now the head coach at Byron Center. BCAM Region 7 Coach of the Year this year. We're very proud of him. He came from Finville. So he invited us to one of your practices. Like I stated before, you're implementing the Memphis offense, watching blood drills, took some stuff from that practice, and then we brought it back to Finville and we implemented your Memphis offense. The second time, this was actually the first time indirectly, you brought a present to West Michigan, and you must really have good relationship with Coach Wooden at his age to fly him across the nation to KZoo, Michigan. I got to listen to you introduce John Wooden and listen to your story, your relationship with John Wooden, and then to see the man, the legend. To me, I don't think it, really, I don't think it gets any bigger than John Wooden. But with that said, let's get into that. I'd like to know. I understand you are, Wikipedia is a great, the internet's a great tool. So I did a little research on you. Ventura, California. How does a Cali kid? I'm going to call this segment Cali Love. How does a Cali kid end up in the Midwest, basically living a big portion of your life in the Midwest? How does that happen? And obviously, your ties to John Wooden, your passion for basketball helped get you to where you're at now. But yeah, give us a little more, some insight on your days with John Wooden.
Well, it's a little bit of a boring story, but like a lot of other, we could get into the Coach Wooden stuff's not boring.
No,
but getting to that spot is a little different. Yes, and so growing up in Southern California, I was more of a football guy than I was a basketball guy. I love basketball.
USC or UCLA?
The USC, and it was yes, it was fight on, and that was the way I grew up, and so but my breaks happened on the basketball side. I knew I wanted to coach, and I was putting feelers out for both basketball and football, trying to get in as a student assistant coach because my knees had gone kaput. There went my football career.
Okay, early retirement.
Yes, exactly. And so it just so happened I had a brother that lived in Mobile, Alabama. And the basketball coach at University of South Alabama was one of the only guys that responded to all my letters trying to get on a coaching staff somewhere. And he said, fine, leave me alone. I'm tired of you bothering me. Come on. So I ended up in Mobile. Well, like any other business, so much of how you climb a ladder ends up being who you know, not what you know. It becomes what you know after you get there.
Right.
But until then, it's who you know. And on that staff at South Alabama uh, were guys that would impact me for a long time. That's how I ended up in the Midwest. Was because one of the assistant coaches at South Alabama got a job at Quincy University, a Division II school in Illinois. I went up there as an assistant with him, and then I ended up getting the head coaching job there, and then that's what led me to be there. And then for 10 years, and then when I went to Western Michigan, it was because a different assistant at South Alabama, Robert McCullum, had become the head coach at Western Michigan. So I was an assistant for him for 3 years before I got the head coaching job at Western Michigan. But while all that was going on, when I was 17, before all that was going on, I should say, when I was 17, was when, as a kid, I used to go to Coach Wooden's camps. But when I was 17, I got the opportunity to work Coach Wooden's camp for the first time. And so I did it. And then it was just 2 years later that they offered me a spot as the assistant director of the camps. And so I did that for the next, until camps closed. So it was almost a decade. And the big perk there, Sam, was that I picked up Coach Wooden in the morning every day and took him home in the afternoon. And so that was in LA, that could be anywhere from a half an hour to an hour each direction. And in the morning, we were almost always alone because it was so early. And that's when I used the time Coach just wanted to know, like, what happened the night before at camp, because it was an overnight camp. And so, any updates? Were kids sick? Is anybody homesick? All that stuff. Now, in the afternoon, we were never alone because that's when Coach Wooden used the time to where if you wanted to do an interview with them or if a former player wanted to be with them, he would use that drive time to use with that person. So every afternoon for an entire summer, for the better part of 10 summers, I would listen to all those questions and all those answers. Wow. For all that time. And then in that, I got to know Coach really well. Really proud to call him my friend. We helped each other out. He would call me when I was at Quincy. It's probably before your time, young fella.
Right.
But we used to get a newspaper, believe it or not. And in the newspaper, when you open up the front page, there was the AP scores. So the Associated Press always had these scores down the side. And so Coach Wooden would read the newspaper every day, and he would call me, I don't know, maybe once every 2 weeks. I called him more than he called me. Let's get that clear. Okay. But he would call me every once in a while, and he'd say, well, I see you picked up a big win last night. How'd you play? And so it turned into a friendship that lasted long after the camps ended. And then we were doing a fundraiser, the event you're talking about. We were doing a fundraiser. We were getting ready to take a foreign trip. And so Coach Wooden agreed to come out and have an evening in Kalamazoo that helped us raise money to take one of our teams overseas on a foreign trip.
I mean, I can vividly remember just him walking across the floor, and I'm like, oh my God, that's John Wooden. So first of all, I think that's gangster that you even got to drive him around. You know what I'm saying? You had a driver.
Yeah.
Who did you have the pleasure of listening to?
Oh my!
As far as guests, because let's take a little time out here. What years were you there working the camps?
It would have been, I don't know, probably 78, 79, somewhere around there until the camps ended. It might have been a little earlier than that, till camps ended in 86-ish, gotcha. 87-ish, somewhere around there. Can't really remember, but it was in that, close to that time frame. Oh. And so the way we would do it, the way Coach did it, not the way we would do it, but the way Coach wanted it, is so he would tell me at the beginning of the day, we had a routine, a camp schedule, and he would tell me at the beginning of the day, okay, Steve, you're picking up. He was one of the only people that called me Steve. Everybody else called me Hawk or Coach Hawk. He always called me Steve. And he'd say, okay, Steve, you're picking up Sam today. And I'd be like, okay. And he had already had a conversation with you telling you where to be. Okay. And so on California Lutheran College campus, which is where we held the camps, you knew which stop sign to go to, which corner to go to. And then I would show up there in the car. So I walked with Coach Wooden around camp. He always took a 5-mile walk. I would walk about the last 2 miles with him as we hit spots on the camp while the kids were going through drills or whatever, and he would stop and teach a little bit here and there. Then I would go pick up the car and then meet you on that corner. And I'd say, Sam, and you'd say, Steve. And that's all he wanted, was us to be able to be cordial with each other. So then I'd say, yeah, hop on in. And then he'd get in the car. Then we would go pick him up at where he finished his walk, which was right in front of the gym. And so then we would get in the car and I would start taking him home to his condo, which was in Encino in Southern California. And they would have their conversation, and I got to listen to all those questions, all those answers, as we talked about. Sometimes it was sometimes I chipped in if there was if Coach wanted me to, or if somebody asked me a question about camp or anything along those lines. But otherwise, it was just me mostly being kind of like a chauffeur. And then after that was over, when we dropped him off, then I would have the same drive back to California Lutheran. So I'd have another half hour, but with whoever the person was that we were with. During that time, it was craziness. I remember one day, excuse me, he said, okay, Steve, you're picking up Tom. And I said, okay, got it. And I pulled up to the stop sign, and it was Tom Landry, the legendary coach of the Dallas Cowboys, because the Cowboys used to work out there at California Lutheran.
Right. They had their training camp there in Southern California.
Say that again?
Doesn't the Cowboys have their training camp in Southern California?
They do. They moved to Oxnard now, but at that time they were in Thousand Oaks. They were about 20 minutes away from each other. And so they had their camp at the same place that we had Coach Wooden's camp, same school. And so, I picked up Coach Landry and took him. And so Coach Landry and Coach Wooden are in the car just talking, and I can't believe I'm in the car. I'm telling you, I've never gripped a steering wheel so tight in my life.
I can imagine. I'm actually gripping my chair right now for you.
That's it. I'm thinking to myself, I can't crash. I cannot crash. If I'm the guy that kills Coach Wooden and Tom Landry, this is not going to go well.
Yeah.
And so, another time you're picking up Tony, and it was Tony Gwynn. It was the All-Star break, and he was out there. Another time was Sparky Anderson, who lived right across the way from the campus at the time. It was All-Star break. Derek Jeter was another one, because same deal. The All-Star break, but the All-Star game was in was either in LA or Anaheim, somewhere around there. But he was there for some reason, but I think that was it. So Bill Walton was in the car a lot because he would work Coach Wooden's camp.
R.I.P.
Yes. Right. And I got to know him, and he was everything that you would think he was, just as good of a person, genuine, enthusiastic. I'll give you one quick story on him. It was one of the first times I dealt with. It was the first time I dealt with Bill Walton. So Coach Wooden, Bill Walton, and his backcourt teammate, a guy named Greg Lee at UCLA, they were big beach volleyball players, and they played on the summer circuit. And so Coach Wooden said, Bill is speaking today at camp. I need you, though, to go pick him up in Santa Monica. And I said, okay. So because he was playing in a beach volleyball tournament. So I went and picked up him and Greg Lee And we get in the car and we start driving, and it was exactly the way you would think Bill Walton would be. And so, I thought I was just going to drive him. And he's like, so Steve Hawkins, that's your name, huh? I'm like, yeah. He's like, so where are you from? And I'm
I
like,
can almost
Ventura.
hear him right now.
Oh, yeah. He's like, so where are you from? And I'm like, Ventura. Ventura? I've spent time in Ventura. So do you surf? And I'm like, yeah, I do. He goes, okay, well, where do you surf? And I said, the Point. And he goes, why would you surf at the Point when you could surf at Oil Piers? Oil Piers is way better than the Point. Now, over the years, as I got to know him, like if I had said the Point or the Oil Piers, he would have said, why would you surf there? He was he was going to give you crap no matter what.
Okay.
And so later on he spoke at camp, and then it was blazing that day. It was like 102. And he spoke at camp, and outside of the gym, after the speaking engagement was over, we had set up a table, and then the kids had lined up if they wanted to get an autograph. And so I set up the table, and with the chairs there, and he, but it was under a tree. It was in the shade because it was so hot. And so he walked out before all the kids got out there, and I had him set up and water and everything. And he's like, then he started calling me Hawk. Excuse me. He's like, Hawk, what are you thinking, dude? I thought we knew each other now. I'm like, I'm not following you. He's like, what would make you think that I would not want to be out in the glorious sun? Look at the day we have. You want me to be in the shade? Are you crazy? This is nuts. I got to be in the sun. I got to take all this in. Look what God has created for us today. That was him.
That sounds like, from everything I've watched about him, everything I've watched on him, that sounds like him.
It is the same person that any of your viewers or listeners might have listened to doing games for ESPN over the last several years. That was not an act. I just don't know.
Gotcha.
So that was just a few people. There were.
Right. I can only imagine.
Yeah.
You grew up in the 70s in LA, and let's just be honest, that was the golden era for probably UCLA basketball. 60s, 70s.
60s and 70s, yeah.
Yeah. So you watched, you were you watched a very special time, I guess what I'm trying to say. What was it like in Westwood in the 70s?
Yeah, and I was really young at that time,
Okay.
And so my brothers were really in the middle of it. But like Coach Wooden retired in 75, and I was 13 at that time. I was born in 1962. So while they had it going, I was just starting to come up. I understood what was happening. But also, my favorite school, as we talked about, was USC. And so USC football, they're in the middle of Heisman Trophy winners.
Right. That's their golden era too.
Without question. And then, once we got into the early 80s, you had the Showtime Lakers, that were going on at the same time. So
were you a fan? Were you a fan of the Showtime Lakers?
Oh, big time.
Okay.
Big time. Yeah, absolutely.
We saw the crossbones here, Detroit bad boys, but
I get it. Yeah, I get it. I got a good dose of that from my time in Kalamazoo.
Got you right. So what an interesting beginning to your coaching career, I guess. The infancy of it, as it started right there, and it started to grow into moving to Mobile, Alabama, and getting your breaks at Quincy and at Western. But wow. Any other names you want to drop? Any other stories you want to give us? Any?
My time with Coach, probably. Well, there's several layers of it. There were those days, with camps and the drives. I can remember. On a more serious note, I can remember Um, the relationship that he had with his wife was incredibly special, incredibly rare. It was the only woman he ever kissed in his life, the only girlfriend he ever had. He, when you see, like, Poly Pavilion, they renamed the court at UCLA after Coach Wooden, but he insisted it's the Nell and John Wooden court. He insisted his wife's name be on there as well. And when his wife passed away, it was devastating for him. And there were a lot of us that were close with him that worried about Coach. Like, how is
Right.
how long is he going to be able to go? He had a lot of family that still lived in the area, kids, grandkids, great grandkids, but we were concerned. And he went strong, for until he passed away at the age of 99. But when the first summer, he canceled camps for the one summer right after his wife passed, and we picked him back up. And we were driving, and we were in the middle of a conversation. And when we got to the condo, it was time to drop him off. And for whatever reason, somebody wasn't with us that day. And we were in the middle of a conversation, and he goes, do you got to get right back? And I said, well, and he goes, what am I thinking about? He said, my name's on the camp. Just tell the directors that I invited you in. So tell them. So he said, come on in. So that was the first time I went inside of his condo, his home.
Wow.
And we talked for another hour. But I was in that home, it had to be, I don't know, 150 more times after that, through the years. Whenever I'd go back, because my family still lives in Cali. So whenever I would go back and visit them, I'd always make a point of stopping by and spending some time with Coach. But I remember when you walk in to the front door, there are awards sitting around like a book, or like a box of Kleenex. But
Wow.
yet you have Sporting News Coach of the Century, and I was like, they named him Coach of the Century. We're in the 80s. We still got 20 more years.
Right.
And they just went ahead and said, nobody's going to pass this guy. All the national championship stuff,
Right.
that's around, and so I remember those moments several through the years. Whenever I would take teams out to play in California, Coach would always come and speak to my team. That was always special. When I had friends or staff members or whatever that wanted to spend time with Coach, we would go down there, and he always took a couple hours to spend with us, in his condo and tell stories. But what's that? The stuff that I learned from him, like we did not get into basketball a lot, like the X's and O's. It was the life stuff, and I'll give you one. I'll give you one story. This one, because this one sticks out.
Hey, one question real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Story. Was he a man of faith? Just out of curiosity.
Big time. Yeah,
Okay.
big time.
All right.
Yeah, big time.
I try not to get into politics or faith or religion, but I did. Okay, that makes sense.
Had a huge impact on me, and not in the way that one might think, because Coach had no problem talking about his faith, and he would talk about being a man of faith, but he was also, vehement about leading a balanced life, and he thought that too much of anything, including religion, was a bad thing. So too much basketball, too much religion, too much politics. He felt like that was a bad thing. So it had a huge impact. He always talked to me about leading a balanced life. And one day when I had a family, which I do now, make sure you spend time with your kids. Don't get too caught up in just the job. And it's not always easy. But he had a huge impact on me, when it came to that. He just didn't want to cram it down anybody's throat. If you asked him about it, he would tell you about his experience.
Gotcha.
But one day we were I had heard him answer this question before, but one day we were in the car and we're driving back, and it was a reporter from a magazine. I couldn't tell you what magazine, but he said, Coach, do you think you could coach today's kids? Because I mean, they've got longer hair. They wear their pants down low. Even at that time, you
Times have
know,
changed.
yes, and he was talking about, and I thought to myself, because I've heard Coach talk about this before, and I thought this poor guy's getting ready to get lit up, and he has no idea, what's getting ready to come. And on this particular day, Coach was in no mood for that answer or for that question. And after he got done with it, Coach answered. He said, "Of course I could. Of course I could coach today's kids." He said, "Young man, let me ask you something. Do you think it was easy coaching during the civil rights movement? Because I did that. Okay, I was there for Martin Luther King. I was there for that. Do you think it was easy coaching during the Vietnam War? Okay, because I did that. I had to coach through that. I had to hold teams together." He said, people got to remember that the ages between 18 and 22 are called a transitional period for a reason. Men are in transition, and during that time, people rebel. It's just what we do. So let me ask you something, young man. When you were growing up, did you maybe wear bell bottoms? And the guy's like, yeah. Did you have like mutton chops, maybe long hair? The guy's like, yeah. Did you experiment with marijuana, maybe? Yeah, yeah. Like he goes, that's what I'm talking about. It's just at 18 to 22, you do things to express yourself while you're trying to find yourself.
That makes sense.
It does. It did completely. And Coach always, and he had a way of. A lot of times he had ways of answering questions. He was always eloquent. He considered himself an English teacher more than he did a basketball coach.
Right.
But he had ways of answering questions. A lot of time it was with a poem. He had poetry like just right here, and he would pull a poem. You were at the event that night in Kalamazoo. A lot of questions that night were answered with a poem. I can't remember it exactly. I used to be able to recite it. Your viewers could look it up, but at the end of every camp, he would always talk to the parents. Then the kids were, so there were 1,000 people up in the stands, and he would encourage the kids. They needed to thank their parents for sending them, and then he would send the parents home with a message, and he'd say, remember, who we're doing this for. And then he would, I'm going to try. It was A Careful Man I Want to Be was the name of it. And I do not, the careful man I want to be, for a little fellow follows me. I do not dare go astray for fear he'll go the self same way. Whatever he sees me do, he tries. I cannot escape his eyes. So I must remember as I go through summer sun and winter snow that I'm building for the years to be for this little chap who follows me.
Interesting.
And he always, I get emotional still when I tell it, because it was the way camp ended every Friday at noon, him speaking to the parents.
Wow. First of all, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Stories. You are truly, truly blessed to have that kind of relationship with such a powerful figure, as a father, a man, as a coach. You know what I'm saying? And that's just not even talking about his accolades in at UCLA. But what a great resource you had.
Yeah, it was unbelievable.
Wow. Not many people can say John Wooden. I was a personal friend with John Wooden. And
Yeah.
all the experiences you had with that. Wow. I'm gonna pivot a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, since we're talking LA, we briefly talked about the Showtime Lakers. I grew up in the 90s. I'm a 79 baby, just to kind of give you an idea about me.
Yeah.
I started watching basketball 89, watching Michigan win their first championship, and then I watched the Bad Boys. Then I watched the Bulls run in the 90s. How good was it basketball in the 80s? How good was it? How good were the two-time Lakers? How good was the Boston Celtics? How good was the up-and-coming Pistons? Let me hear you. Let me hear what you got.
Yeah, I don't want to sound like the old guy, because I can appreciate. I've just seen different eras, go
Right.
through it. And so I mess around. I mess around with their guys all the time. We, like I said, we just had a recruit in here just a little while ago. We said goodbye to him, and we've got another one coming in tonight. And I always mess because everybody wants to get into the conversation about the GOAT, and is it Jordan or is it LeBron, and then every once in a while people will throw in, Kobe or whoever it may be, and I'm like, you guys are missing the boat. It's Kareem. It's clearly Kareem. It's the most
Isaiah Thomas
unstoppable.
says that.
What's that?
Isaiah Thomas says that Kareem's the best, the GOAT.
It's if sometimes I'll go to YouTube and I'll pull up clips of all you got to do is type in after you leave the podcast here. Go just type in search for, especially for you young pups out there. I'm encouraging you now. Type in the search bar Kareem Skyhook and watch what comes up. And it looks like a video. And that's what some of the players that I've had are like, that's not real. That's a video game. I'm like, no, this dude was thrown in the most unstoppable shot in the history of the game of basketball. They had to change the rules of the game because of the man 3 times. And so that's how unfair it was. So anyway, I'm a little biased. I grew up out there at that time.
Gotcha. But okay, I was going to bring up the GOAT conversation with you, but I don't want to talk about the GOAT. I want to talk about who's better, in your opinion, Kareem or Shaq?
Kareem.
What differentiates them? Because to me, how do you stop Shaq? There was a time when no one could stop him. He was just that much bigger, stronger than anyone.
Yeah, the thing that I think separated Kareem is his ability to pass as well. Kareem or Shaq was unstoppable. You get you posted down low, get you on his rear end, back you down, just dunk, pull down the backboard on top of you. And that was unstoppable. For sure. Kareem could do that, but when you put somebody, if you double team, when I say double team Shaq, I don't mean double team him like after he got the ball. I mean, if you put somebody in front of him and somebody behind him, you could take away Shaq. You had a very difficult time still taking away Kareem because Kareem would step way out onto the floor because he was just as comfortable doing that as he was anything else. The other thing about Kareem was he was a much better defensive player out on the floor in his heyday. Shaq, once he started getting put into ball screens, especially later in his career. Now, early in his career, when you see the early pictures of Shaq, like if Penny had never gotten hurt and Shaq had stayed with the Magic, people would have been talking about them, in my opinion, like the way they talk about the Bad Boys or the Lakers. I think that could have been a dynasty, but Penny got hurt and then Shaq went to the Lakers, and so it was very different. But I would take Kareem just because of his offensive repertoire. It was bigger, the sky hook, and also his ability to pass. Shaq was not known for his passing. It didn't mean he wasn't a great center, but Kareem could do more things.
So in an age where, I guess I want to say this is like the European influence where the big men now are out on the perimeter. Yeah. Could Kareem adjust to play in this era?
I think so, because he was athletic. He could get out there. That's exactly what I'm talking about right there, because I've seen the different eras.
Right.
And so the game has evolved. The game has changed. Like Kareem, because one person that does not get brought up into the GOAT conversation may truly be as a single player the GOAT, and that was Wilt. Wilt Chamberlain,
right?
The man averaged 50 and 25 one year. And he scored over 100, or he scored 100 in a game. He was a physical specimen. It was just so natural for him. He didn't work at it as hard. He wasn't as dedicated to it, according to the people around him. Like Bill Sharman was his coach. I used to work his basketball camps also. And so I used to hear Wilt stories, and Jerry West and Gail Goodrich getting upset with Wilt, Happy Hairston, guys like that were his teammates, that used to get upset at him for really lack of work ethic or commitment to like a game plan, even though he could just take over the game. He didn't need to do that as much. But he was he was a nightmare. He was a combination of Shaq and Kareem, because he had some skill level as well as athleticism, as well as bulk.
It's just interesting. At least from what I grew up and what you know of is, the big guys being on the block, elbows, short corner. It's not like that no more. Now they have to at least have some kind of consistency on a shot, long range. You know what I'm saying? At least be able to shoot a 3-pointer, I guess. It's the days of Patrick Ewing at the block with the knee pads are definitely over.
Until the next player. I mean, basketball, football does too. I think probably every sport does. But you're always looking at who won the championship, whether you're playing in the MAC or the Big Ten or whether you're in the NBA. You're looking at who won the championship, and then you're trying to construct your roster in a way that can compete against those guys, in the way they play. So, now there's people running around trying to figure out, like the Warriors, when they had it really going here a while back, what position is Draymond Green? I mean, what is he? Is he a point guard? Is he a 3? Is he a 4? Is he a 5? And he's one of my favorite players, like, ever. And we recruited Draymond when I was at Western Michigan. He'd been on our campus I don't know how many times. And then, of course, when Coach Izzo got involved, that was that.
Right.
And terrific people. But his ability defensively to switch just changed the way things are played right now. I watched the play-in game as we record this right now. One of the play-in games was last night, and I said you're going to see a lot more switching going on away from the ball and on the ball than you ever do during the season. Because teams just it's more difficult. It's easier to disrupt offenses when you switch, and they don't do it as much during the season because it is taxing. And you can take advantage of mismatches. Once you get into the playoffs, the guys don't really care about preserving their bodies. They just got to do what they got to do to win.
Right. Speaking of Draymond Green, I've had debate with some people about him. Do you let me ask you this question: Draymond Green or Dennis Rodman, if you had to have one?
Draymond Green. Yeah.
Why? Because his ability to switch.
Pass.
Yeah, his ability to pass. Yeah, he's a point forward. And like the best teams that I have, when you look at, again, the Warriors, back then you not only had him, but you had KD as well. It wasn't just Steph and Clay. Draymond will be the first to admit it. He talked about it at length. Like he's a good player everywhere else, but with that group, he's a great player. And his competitive desire is just his competitive nature is off the charts. We could see that. I don't know if there may be somebody as competitive as him that I can remember, but I don't remember anybody more competitive than him. You could throw Kobe and Michael Jordan and guys that are Kevin Garnett has a reputation of being the toughest guy, the most intense. But Draymond's up there, for sure. But his ability, his IQ, his IQ is off the charts. as a basketball player. He really understands the geometry of the game, why this pass leads to the next pass. He'll break off a scouting assignment because he's watched enough film to know that even though I'm supposed to be over here guarding this action, I've watched enough film to know, oh, they're getting ready to run a backdoor over here, and he'll break away, and then he'll make a steal that he has no business making the steal on because he's not supposed to be involved in the play. But he cares enough to watch enough film to make the play, and he's just special that way. Now, Dennis Rodman, I grew up with,
Right.
not personally, but I mean watching as a player. And his ability to rebound and his competitiveness was also, I mean, his toughness was legendary.
I think his energy is what really,
Energy.
his energy that he brought. You can listen to, former players from the Bulls teams or the Pistons teams.
Yeah.
He was just one person that could get in somebody's head and
Yes.
get his head off the charts energy. Like he was going to get that rebound. There was no doubt he was going to get that rebound.
Yes.
He put his mind to it. Wow, interesting.
No, he's an interesting guy. There was, I did get to know really, really well a guy named Jack Haley. Okay, Jack Haley played for the Bulls. He played for the Spurs as well when Dennis Rodman was there. And Jack was kind of known as Dennis Rodman's handler, if you will. Like he helped keep Dennis here, in the lanes a little bit. And if you knew Jack at all, that was like putting the wolf in charge of the hen house.
Oh, geez.
That was not. No, Jack could get himself in plenty of trouble also. But we used to work basketball camps. One of my best friends, a guy named Jeff Dunlap, ran a basketball camp called the Complete Player Basketball Camp in Orange County, and he ran it with Jack, and he played with Jack and Reggie Miller. They were roommates at UCLA, and so Jack played in the NBA for a number of years, and got to be really good friends with Dennis Rodman. They hung out a lot, but every year they had 2 weeks of camp, and Jack would bring in NBA players to speak at camp, and Jordan came in, Rodman came in. But anyway, we got to know each other all really well. But Jack's family owned a restaurant, I believe it's still there, in Huntington Beach called Captain Jack's. And it was a beautiful restaurant right on the ocean or whatever. But after camp on Friday, me and Jack and JD would go eat at Captain Jack's, and eat a nice meal and relax and whatever. And it was a casual place right by the beach. But there were times when, like an NBA player would be with us. Jack was an NBA player, but there were times. Well, we went in there one time with Dennis Rodman. Came in there, and Jack told me ahead of time, and we'd hung out a couple of times, just playing cards. And he's a shy guy, but Jack told me a couple of times, or we'd hung out a couple of times, and then we went in there, and he's like, "Hey, Dennis is coming in. We're going to sit back here towards the back, because the crowd will get. I mean, once they know he's in here, it'll get a little crazy." I'm like, "Oh boy." So we go in, and we sit down, and then Dennis, they got him in a back door, and so we're sitting. There's 4 of us at the table, and then there's a commotion, and up towards the front, and Dennis is like, "Make sure, Jack, I'm sorry, make sure she gets through. Let her in." And it was Madonna.
Wow.
Because he was dating Madonna.
Yeah, there was a time he was Madonna for a minute.
And so she comes in the door and sits us. Well, all 5 of us. So I'm sitting at a dinner with Madonna and Dennis Rodman, and it was chaos. Chaos.
Wow.
I'm not even going to get into the time that I spent Dennis Rodman's birthday at the Palms Hotel in Las Vegas, and the perch up above with the marquee that said Dennis Rodman's birthday party here tonight. And so there were like 5 of us up in this perch while chaos was happening down below.
Wow.
We're not, this is a G-rated
Yeah,
podcast.
G-rated,
We're keeping
G-rated.
it right here.
But we can only imagine.
Yeah, it was
Right?
fun. It was
Especially
fun.
like in the Last Dance when Mike tells that legendary story. He's got to go get him in Las Vegas.
Yes.
A couple days off.
Yes.
Can only imagine. Like I said, I grew up watching Dennis Rodman in wedding dresses, crazy,
Yeah.
and, just being a spectacle. But he was good at his craft. That's for dang sure. He was
Really good.
So now, Coach, I'm gonna keep it in the basketball theme. I'm gonna do a left front pivot, and we're gonna pivot to your days at Western. I know we're here in West Michigan, so I know some viewers would like to know maybe a little more insight on your days at Western. I can see, I was doing a little research. You had a lot of success there. I mean, 7 out of the 10 postseason appearances were under your tenure.
Yeah.
From what I read. You're 4th in victories in the MAC, is that correct?
I believe so. Yeah,
Wow.
I believe so.
Wow. Give us some insight on your time in KZoo.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I loved it. I still love it. That place will always be special to me. 20 years. I'm 60 now, so a third of my life was spent in the zoo, and half of my professional life was spent there, and so yeah, it's a very, very special place. A lot of great memories there. A lot of I mean, the players are always what make it, or what makes your experience as a coach. And then we had a lot of fun teams to be around. Yeah, in Kalamazoo. I fell in love with Kalamazoo, and I still have nothing. I still have a lot of friends there. Whenever we're up that way, I get together with former players, that are in the area, or they come down and see me.
How rewarding! That's got to be rewarding just to catch up with former players.
It's the best. It's the absolute best. I don't know if there's anything better. I've said this. I know you follow me on Facebook. I've said this a million times. I just don't know if there's anything better than, professionally speaking, than being able to get together with former players, and when former players reach out and say hi to you,
right?
And stay in touch. It's awesome. We had 2 years ago. I went back to Quincy University, where I coached for 2 years before I came here to SIU, and 3 of my former players, Brian Snyder from Cadillac, and Austin Ritchie from up in the region in Indiana, and Connor Tavey, there's from the east side of the state. They came to Quincy for a weekend and hung out.
I think I've seen that post.
Yeah, it was great. And you go from coaching them, and then as they move on, you can admire them as men. You get to meet their families as they have those. But you can still now you can have a beer with them,
right?
As well, and you can sit and share stories. And
right.
I found out things that weekend that I was like, wait a minute, you guys did what? And there were things that you find out about years later. It's it's the absolute best.
You know what? I coached, high school basketball or middle school basketball and JV girls basketball for about 6 years. But it's always nice to, catch up with old players, even if it's at the store or I bump into them, or I get invited to one of their weddings. That's what I feel is like the most rewarding part of coaching, is the impact you've had on people, because at least at the high school level, I got a $1,500 check. It wasn't about the money. So the relationships you build in the times that post, let's say just post 21, that you bump into them and you get to, maybe have an adult beverage with them and just catch up. And at that point, you guys can relate,
Yeah. There's no question, and they can, you can tell stories, about your times together. And a lot of times it's I'll tell you what, it's really interesting to me is that in a time where getting on kids is starting to become more and more taboo, and about whether it be the screaming or the yelling or the language or whatever it is, that is really, really frowned upon. And people say that you can't do that anymore. When I get together with the old players, that's all they want to talk about. That's what they remember. They remember, oh God, remember, Coach, when you went crazy and you did this or you did this? Oh, you remember when you got on him and you said this to him? Those are the stories they actually remember in terms of stories. But helping shape them is a huge thing. I'll go back to, I did a podcast. You're doing a podcast when COVID hit. My contract at Western Michigan was not renewed, and it happened 2 days before COVID hit. So I've got 2 young daughters. I've got a stepson, and all of a sudden I don't have a job, and COVID hits. And I don't think that Western's administration really knew what they were doing at that. I don't think that they had a feeling that it was going to be a complete shutdown. If they did, I don't think they did it out of malice. I think if they had known that I was going to be without a job and that the country was going to shut down for as long as it did, I'm not sure that things would have happened the way they happened. But it did. And so during that time, it was great for me. That next year was great for me to be able to connect with former players, even though you couldn't do it in person as much. But then also I did my own podcast, and I started my own LLC, which got into corporate coaching and was doing a lot of work with kids and universities on NIL. That was at the very beginning. And so I started doing a lot of these kind of things. And it was called Next Possession. Was the name of my LLC. It was the name of my podcast, was Next Possession with Steve Hawkins. And I did 50 episodes of it. And most of it was all leadership driven, but most of it was college basketball centric. Guests, with Coach Izzo, Mark Few, Matt Painter. We could go
working your network. Working
that. And it was at a time when they had nothing to do because It was COVID. They couldn't be with their teams. And so it was really easy they had nothing else to do. So taking an hour to do this was like, sure, and I could tape it at 11 o'clock at night and we'd go about our business. But the reason I get into this is, and this probably, I think, there's a couple of things that if you would ask my former players, that they might have taken away, that we probably hammered home as much as anything else, which is Coach Wooden's definition of success, which I'll remind me about that. I'll come back to it. Yeah, the pyramid, it's at the top of the pyramid. And then the other thing is we were playing a game. I don't remember who was it against, but it was at home. And it was a game that we all knew we were supposed to win. And it was a conference game, but we knew we were better. And we went into halftime. It was one of those games where everything was a little off. We weren't in sync. And the stars weren't aligned right, whatever it was. Referees' calls. The guys were starting. Everything was going sideways. The referees were chirpy. Our guys were. It was just going. Yeah, it was a mess. And so we went into halftime up by like 4 or 5. And it was a team we thought we should have been, might have even put them away by then. And so I was talking with the guys, and finally I just said, guys, we've got to I don't know what's going on, but we got to stop. Just quit it, okay? And we were moaning and groaning about officials. We were, if they missed a shot, their body language was bad, all of that. And I said, just stop and get to the next possession. Okay, we've got to get to the next possession and put the last possession behind us. And I just rolled off my tongue, and that was it. And we won the game. We played okay, I remember. But about 2 weeks later, I had a player from inner city Detroit. I'm like, yeah. And so he went through what he was going through at home. It was family related, and I told him that we need to put things in boxes. And I'm not going to get into the whole long story, but the short of it was that what's going on at home is impacting basketball and it's impacting your schoolwork. And you have to be able to separate everything. When you are in school, you can't do anything about basketball and you can't do anything about home. So just concentrate on your schoolwork. When you come into basketball practice, can't do anything about homework, can't do anything about home. So just lock in to practice. And when it's time to deal with your family issues, devote all of your attention to those family issues. But you've got to, and he said, so coach, what you're telling me is I got to get to the next possession. And I went, wow. Okay, so he heard that 2 weeks ago. And then I'll be dang if the guy did not, the next year he came back and he had a tattoo of next possession and a tattoo of Coach Wooden's definition of success on him as well. And so those were two overriding things that went through our program: Coach Wooden's definition of success and the next possession.
Wow. Thanks for sharing. So with that said, your time at Western.
Yeah.
Give us, I guess, some highlights. What do you remember most? What do you want to remember most about your time in KZoo?
Ooh, that's because 20 years there. Getting there. Pardon me.
A lot of memories.
Yeah, a lot of memories. We got there.
Really, we saw you become a young, a mid. I don't even know how to say this. Like you grew.
Oh, you could say it. I grew up there.
Basically. You grew up there. It's basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. No, we got there, and there were 3 players when we first got there. That was it. That was all that was left, which was good news and bad news. Because the bad news is there were only 3 guys. The good news is we kind of had a clean palette to work with. And so we got to put together the program. Again, Robert McCullum was the head coach at the time, and so we built it.
You remember the 3 players that stayed?
We had John Powell, we had Casey Cavett, and Taylor Bro.
Those 3 players stayed from the previous.
Those 3 stayed. There was also it was interesting, but there was also, we had a walk-on who used to be a manager by the name of Pat Cleland, who's from Rockford. He's now a rapper, and he goes under the name Rick Chime. You can look him up. He does unbelievable work. Rick Chime. And he was actually the guy that helped me with my podcast. He produced my podcast for me.
Nice.
Yeah, and we had him as well. And then we put together, there was another couple of guys that were around, but they didn't stick around long. Jesse Slaughter was one. Tom, I can't remember Tom's last name. They were around for just a little while in the spring, and then that was it. So going into the next year, it was just Pat and John Powell and Casey Cavett and Taylor Bro.
You were working overtime on recruiting.
Yeah, we had to put together a team in a hurry, and there was no such thing as a transfer portal. So it wasn't like we could go just grab dudes,
right?
Like we did, like you could do now. We had to go get a bunch of high school guys that were available, some JC guys, and that worked out well for us because we found Mike Williams eventually, who became MVP of the MAC for us when my first year as the head coach at Western in 2004. So the championship teams are easy to remember, the NCAA tournament teams, but we won 8 MAC West titles in the 17 years I was a head coach there.
Very successful.
All of those, I remember teams, I remember guys more than I remember the teams. I could remember special times, tournaments, but it's easy to point to the 2 NCAA tournaments, that were there. But the friends at the university, I just watched as we are taping this. I'm not sure when it goes up, But just this past Saturday night, Western's hockey team won the national championship.
We're over your rooms when we're yeah.
It's unbelievable. I was watching it at home. I wanted to go. It was in St. Louis. We're only 2 hours from
Yeah, you're only 2 hours away.
And I wanted to go, but we had to recruit him, and so otherwise I would have gone over there as well. But Andy Murray, Jim Colhane was the head coach when I first got there. He still works at the university. Then Andy Murray became the head hockey coach, and the hockey team and the basketball team worked out at the same time in the weight room. So I got to know Andy real well. Just one of the best human beings I've ever met in my life. And then Blash came in, Jeff Blashill, obviously, and then Pat Ferschweiler, after Andy, and so anyway, there's some great memories with other sports. It wasn't just my those guys became friends. The other coaches became friends. That it's not just it wasn't just I was really good friends with a lot of the football coaching staff. Those were guys that I hung out with all the time.
Who was the coach, the football coach at Western at the time? I went to a game in 2001, and I don't know how they did this, but they had got a game with Virginia Tech, and Marcus Vick was the quarterback, and they came to Kalamazoo. My sister was going to Western at the time, so I got a ticket. Who was the coach?
2000, when I first got there, Gary Darnell.
Gary Darnell. Okay.
Okay, and I think he would have been coaching there still in 2001. I think he was still there. Bill Cubit. Bill
He's
Cubit
from Indiana State, right? He came from Indiana State. Bill Cubit.
I don't. That doesn't sound familiar, but it doesn't mean that's not true.
I'm not 100%. I'm not. I got to fact. I got to do my research department.
Yeah, I'm not. I can't remember exactly where Coach Cubit came from, but he was there for quite a while, and then PJ came in. PJ Fleck came in during my time
Tim Lester
there. Yep, and then Tim Lester, and so those were the coaches when I was there at Western. But I was more, I was friendly with those guys, but the assistant football coaches were, I went through a divorce. I moved in with the director of football ops, who's one of my best friends in the world, still to this day, a guy named Tim Knox, who's now at the University of Illinois. And so our strength and conditioning coach, Timmy Herman, is still the strength and conditioning coach for Western hockey as well as basketball. So, the great memories of a lot of friends. And then obviously the teams, the games, I could go through some unbelievable memories of games. I remember Mike Flowers taking us into triple overtime. He had 3 buzzer beaters at Milwaukee. Yeah, it was nuts, and so we just had some great times there. I've got a lot of fond memories there. I remember way more of the good than the bad. The last couple of years were rough because of injuries, and like I said, just some people think that I would be overly bitter about my contract not being renewed at the end, but I understood what was going on and the internal politics that was taking place, and I kind of got caught in the crosshairs of that, and bad timing. But I've been able to all of those experiences there. I've been able to use, and we're here now in Carbondale, and we love it. It's a basketball crazy community.
Speaking of Carbondale, let's pivot to your current situation now. How far are you from Cape Girardeau?
About an hour.
Okay, so I used to, the company I used to work for in here in Holland, and they used to send me out to Prairieville, which is like 30 miles north of Cape Girardeau. But I went to Cape Girardeau a lot, and there was a time I took a back way home, but I went through Carbondale.
Yeah.
I did not realize that Walt Frazier was from a former Saluki. That's what I thought was really super cool. What's it like coaching at SIU? You guys are in the newly constructed Missouri Valley Conference.
We're in the Valley, and I mean, we've been a charter member from the beginning, and it's each of the last 2 years we've been ranked the ninth best conference in the nation. This year ahead of the American West Coast Conference. Like it is the thing about this league is it is basketball centric. I mean, it is all about basketball. We have football. We have good football here, but it's not. You don't have to share it like at Western. One of the things that could be difficult was that you also had in basketball, you also had football and hockey,
Right.
and so you have MAC resources, but you had three major sports there. And there were only two other schools, Bowling Green and Miami of Ohio, that also had hockey. Everybody else had football and basketball. And when I first got into the MAC, it was very much of a basketball-centric conference. And then as the presidents change, and then money and all, we're all here now in the crazy state of college athletics because of the money, and that got driven, and that's where Maction was first formed because the league the MAC was the first league to go to middle of the week college football games, and so ESPN needed programming, and it's in the middle of the season. The MAC got no airtime because everybody wants to watch a Big Ten game or Notre Dame or USC or pick a game.
Right.
So the MAC got no airtime. So there was a way. Rick Christ was the commissioner of the league. Genius. I love the guy.
You cut the deal with ESPN?
Pardon me?
He cut the deal with ESPN?
He cut the deal with ESPN and got it going. And then now, of course, they play every night of the week, college football games. But Rick Christ was the guy who got it going. The presidents and the athletic directors at that time in the MAC, they gave a mandate. They wanted football to be better. Well, as football got better, basketball got worse. And things really evened out there. I mean, this was at a time when the MAC was producing Wally Zerbiak and Earl Boykins, Dan Marley, Chris Kaman. You could go down the list of great Gary Trent, great MAC players, and the NBA now. I mean, there's no NBA players on their rosters anymore, and again, it's just sort of evened out as football has come up. There's just not as much money to go around, and again, I understood it, but it wasn't. It didn't mean that it was enjoyable to go through. And I have my own feelings about it, but I was just a basketball coach, in terms of where we should be putting our resources.
Right.
But at the same time, I still understood it.
Gotcha. So you're at SIU right now. I noticed that, I was looking at your schedule when we first started talking in the middle of November. You were like in a week of, you had Florida and you had, I think, Oklahoma State in the same week, or relatively close. How tough was that Florida team?
Oh, my. Yeah, I'd forgotten. I got sidetracked. I apologize because you had asked me about SIU, and then I ended up going
It's all good, brother. It's all
good. We started thinking about Walt Frazier. And anyway, right. The thing about when we took over, I just looked at it. I just went through about 5 days ago my first day of being on the job a year ago. And so when we got here, it was the same thing. We had three players, just the same way as it was at Western, that stayed behind. We had to get into the transfer portal. Excuse me. We had to get into the transfer portal heavy. And we slapped together a team. And we didn't do bad. I think we would have done a little bit better, but we lost our point guard. We had one real point guard, and he went down in the Florida game. He was our leading scorer, and he went down in the Florida game. Elijah Elliott tore his ACL, and we never had him, so we had to play out of position the rest of the year. It took us a while. But the Florida team, they happened to be my scout at the time, and I'm looking around like, I don't know about this now. I mean, they've got size. They've got the ability to shoot. They've got a little bit of everything, and don't hold me to it. I'm going to be in the ballpark, but it was something like 11 minutes, maybe even 7 minutes. It was right around the 10-minute mark. We were down by 4 in the first half, and in 2.5 minutes, we were down by like 22. In 2.5 minutes, and if you made a mistake, they turned it into points like now, and they were very explosive. They didn't beat themselves. They were very solid defensively. That was a really good team.
What about the size? That's what, when I watch Florida, and I didn't watch a lot of them, that's what sticks out to me is just the size.
Yeah, and it's not just when most people think of size, you think of, okay, they got good big guys. No, their guards were big too. It was a big team. Yeah, I mean, you had guys you had guards at 6'3" to 6'6", small forwards, in the 6'6", 6'7" range. You had their big guys, were 6'10", and all of them knew where the weight room was, and they knew where the cafeteria was. These were not skinny guys, and I can't think of his name right now. On top of that, the kid they've got redshirting, I almost had his name. He's 7'6".
Yeah.
And he's redshirting.
Yeah.
So he'll be playing for them next year. So it'll be interesting.
You guys haven't picked up a 7'6", 7 foot 6-inch guy in the portal.
We could put 2 guys on top of each other,
geez, right?
and on each other's shoulders,
or 3 midgets. Might be able.
Yeah.
3 or 4 midgets.
That's it.
Hey, so I'm looking. I did a little research on you. You are the defensive coordinator. That's what they list you. They also list you as the NIL coordinator. Now I know this. We probably don't have enough time, but I guess explain to the viewers in layman's terms what is NIL, and I guess your thoughts on it, because to me, way different than what I grew up with, and the money's flowing everywhere, uncapped, no cap, no salary cap. So just if you could just give us a little insight.
Yeah, we would need a whole nother episode to even really get into this. But the short version, because I could go off on several different tangents. And I don't mean like on a soapbox, but I just mean there's a lot of layers to this. A lot of questions about this, that, and the other. What a lot of people, where this has kind of gone off the rails a little bit, is that what people forget about is how it started. Okay, and name, image, and likeness, the way it started was through the Ed O'Bannon case.
Right.
Okay, which is a UCLA guy. And Ed O'Bannon sued the NCAA a long time ago. I don't know what year it was.
Probably like 15, 20 years ago he started this.
I would say you're right. I would say you're right in that ballpark.
Started here in Ed O'Bannon in his case.
Yes. And what it was about was Ed O'Bannon was in his dorm room playing like college basketball on the video game, and he was playing himself, like he could play himself on the video game. And he thought to himself, the short version is he thought to himself, somebody's making money off of this.
Off of me.
And so that doesn't seem right. And he is a really intelligent guy. And so that started everything. He sued. It brought a lot of attention to it. He eventually won. And it was a weird deal. Because like every year, this is something crazy, because you could be Western Michigan on the game. Okay. And if you played Western Michigan, I'd never played it, but our guy showed it to me. If you were Western Michigan, there is a guy coaching the team that looks like me. There's a bald, fat guy out there that's Steve Hawkins.
Hey, no name calling.
It's all right. It's me. I'm calling myself. Yeah.
All right.
And so I remember the first year I got it in EA Sports. Okay, so I got an envelope in the mail from EA Sports. I'm like, what is this? And I open it up, and it's a check for $187. And I'm like, they sent this to the wrong. I don't know what they're doing. Why did I get this? And it was for them using my image. So the players couldn't get paid, and yet they were paying coaches, and I didn't even know that I was going to get a check. And so it was a crazy way that it very began, or at the very beginning. What it's turned into now is just a way to pay players. And it again, I think it started off okay, just allowing guys to go out and go to, I don't know if you have a sponsor or not, but if you were to go to Buffalo Wild Wings and strike up a deal with, or the local sports bar or whatever it is, and strike up a deal, and, if they want to pay you a few bucks or give you a few meals or whatever, you could do that. And if you were worth more, you could do that. But it's turned into something altogether, something different. And the most common, I'll leave out the 10 miles in between what I just explained to where I'm going with this. And where we're at now are fans that are, you get into the Twitterverse, and they're saying we should just go back to, if you transfer, you got to sit out a year. Or we're paying players, and we just got to put a salary cap on them, on what's going on here. And it's all, I understand that. But the reason they can't is because the NCAA has lost every single lawsuit. This is completely litigation driven.
Right.
So if you were to ask me any question about NIL, I could answer it right now. Why can't we go back to having to sit out a year in between transfers? Well, the reason is somebody sued the NCAA and said, why are you penalizing me? Because if you, John Q. Public, if you wanted to switch jobs, you don't have to sit out a year. You could just go to work. You could just leave. Forget about a coach. Anybody could just do this. So why do I have to be penalized? And they won the lawsuit, because it isn't fair. Why isn't there a salary cap? That's a big one right now. And we just came back from our convention in San Antonio, where we sat in on the meeting. Well, if you put a salary cap on it, there has to be an admission, basically, that it is pro sports. And if you go to the pro sports model, you bring in now antitrust, because now they're officially employees. Okay, if they're officially employees, the cheerleaders are now officially employees, sued by definition. Okay, because they're required X amount of hours to be there. You have a supervisor, which is a coach. There are certain things that are by law, by federal law, and some cases state law, that make you employees. And so if you ever do that, universities, if we ever went to making them employees, we are truly done with college athletics, because the universities like a Western Michigan, they can't afford that. They could not afford to pay everybody. So what you would see is the mid-majors dropping to Division II and to Division III.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, thank you for the short version of that.
Yeah.
Next question is, how does SIU compete?
Yeah, we're really fortunate here because our athletic director, a guy named Tim Leonard, is extremely aggressive. And as I said, the league itself is very basketball minded. And he is one of the most basketball minded ADs. And so he is all in. Like, he is ultra aggressive about trying to help us be the best in the Valley. When we got to, again, this is not knocking Western, but when we got towards those last probably 5 to 7 years, maybe even longer at Western Michigan, we were in survival mode. We certainly weren't on offense. We were just trying to, if football broke, so they fire a coach, they get a new coach. That coach wants a grass field instead of turf. So there's another $1 million, and so, hockey, something happens. All right, well, we got to put money into that. Basketball never broke. It was probably one of the worst things, that we were always just good enough to where they didn't have to pay attention to us. But we couldn't get great. And I was trying to go from good to great, and it was just falling on deaf ears. So a change was needed, because I couldn't get anywhere with where I wanted to take the program. Here, no. Here it is all basketball. It is, what do you need? Do you need anything more? There are questions like that are being asked. I'll give you a quick example of this. We got here, and my boss, Scott Nagy, who's tremendous basketball mind, has won everywhere he's been. He likes to practice in the morning, from 9 o'clock in the morning until noon. Not punitive, but just he wants the kids to have the rest of the day. And so when we started, but around here they had always practiced, like a lot of other teams, at 3 o'clock. And when Scott said that he wanted to practice in the morning, we were told, we'll get this worked out. And we're like, seriously? And they're like, to be honest with you, there are people on campus that are going to hear that you want to practice in the morning, and they will actually change class times to make sure classes are available so that men's basketball can practice in the morning. And that's what we deal with around here. It's an unbelievable feeling to be the show.
Yeah, I mean, definitely not having to compete with the football program or the hockey program and getting all the, majority of the resources. You're definitely in a basketball conference, Indiana State, Northern Iowa, Valpo, Drake, Murray State. I mean, you're in a basketball conference, so yes, this makes a lot of sense that you are getting all the support from your AD.
Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting. How much more time you have?
A couple of minutes.
Okay, a couple of minutes. I'm gonna end it like this. All good things have to come to an end. I appreciate your time. What's the future hold for Coach Hawkins?
I love it here. And being the associate head coach is kind of like the best of all worlds, because as the head coach, so much of your time gets taken away from why you got into coaching, which is why you coach. It's in that spending time with the guys, as the head coach, you have to go into meetings with the athletic director. You have to go into the meetings. You have to have a certain amount of appearances, that you have to be at. There are things like that take away from doing what you love to do, which is work with the kids, watch film, scout, hang out with the guys, get to know them better, and be around basketball. And as an assistant coach, I get to do that now. And when Coach gave me the associate head coach, and then the NIL thing, and then he gave me the defense, and now I'm back doing some of the things that I used to do as a head coach. But it's fine, I love it, and so I really like it. My daughters are now 14 and 12, living here.
I just want to get that.
Thank you. And we love where we live here, and we got a beautiful home, and we love where we live, and my girls got good friends, and so it'd take a lot to get me out of here right now. So we love what we're doing, love where we're at. I could be here for a very long time. You never say never about anything. That's a Coach Woodenism, by the way. That's another Woodenism. Never say never, never say always. So, yes.
So I mean, unless you get a opportunity in the West Coast, you could be in the Midwest for a few more years.
Yeah, no question. No question. I would always. would always be open, certainly for another head coaching position. I don't want to, didn't really want to go out the way I went out at Western, and so I would always be open for another head coaching position. But this right here is about as good as it gets. If you're not going to be a head coach, this is about as good as it gets, and I'm enjoying what I'm doing, love where I'm at, and get to do a lot of the coaching stuff still. So I'm in heaven.
So, just with you saying that, through the lens of Facebook, you can really tell you're happy where you're at.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It is. This isn't fluff. This isn't stuff that I mean, this is it. I truly am blessed. I'm a blessed man to be where I'm at after all this time. 40 plus years of coaching. Always said, I was told a long time ago, I've repeated it since, if you find something you're passionate about, what you want to do for a living, then you'll never work a day in your life. And I'm sitting here. This is about as dressed up as I get these days. You don't have to wear suits anymore for games. And other than that, it's sweat, so I get to wear pajamas every day to work.
Wow.
Elastic is my friend. That's right. So life is good, my guy. Life is good.
Quickly, LA Dodgers, RIP Fernando.
Yes.
All I gotta say is bow down. When Ice Cube came out with Bow Down, on the motorcycle, I was like, oh my God, I grew up with that song. So I was like, hell yeah. And
yeah, there was a couple.
Yankees didn't know what to do, man. They're like, what? And Freddie was like, this. I was like, that's gangster.
Oh, it was unbelievable. There were growing up out there. There were a couple of moments. There was that one. That one's kind of unexpected. Nobody. It's baseball. Baseball's a little more straight and narrow, traditions, things like that. But from a California flavor, like that hit. It was big. That hit. The only thing from California guy that came close was the Super Bowl show going back a few years when it was in LA, when Dr. Dre and
I know.
And all of that. That was a whole nother California flavor, when and of course my Rams won it that year too.
Gotcha. Nice.
Yeah.
So you're a Rams fan, not a Raiders?
No. The Raiders were always, growing up, it was the LA Rams, the Oakland Raiders.
And USC Trojans.
And USC Trojans.
No
doubt. No doubt.
Thank you, Coach, once again. I'm gonna let you go. God bless you. I'd like to have you some other time.
Would love to.
When the stars align. But take care. God bless. Keep being you. Keep bringing that winning mentality that you had at Western to SIU. Go Blue. I have to say.
I appreciate it. So you got to add this for this show right here. So a lot of people don't know what a Saluki is.
Yeah.
Okay, so a Saluki is the fastest dog in the world. It's an Egyptian dog. Okay, so the Greyhound is a descendant of the Saluki. And we actually there's a family locally that raises Salukis. So we have two Salukis that sit right behind us, brown dog, gray dog. Okay, you're doing the Michigan thing. So as a Saluki, we've got this right here. So these are the dog ears right here. Here's the nose right there. So this is Go Dogs.
Go Dogs. I'm going to do that.
Get that thumb in there. Get that thumb in there. Get the thumb in.
Oh, right here?
The thumb in. There it is right there.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs. Take care, Coach. I'm going to be following you from afar. Hopefully we can touch base again. God bless you.